that I think Charlotte and Margaret really started this off, but throughout the team, as it's built over time, it's always taken a very common sense approach. So when we started thinking about this divide, we thought, well, why don't we just, instead of assuming that researchers will understand what decision makers need, why don't we just ask them? And it really started in that very sort of like pragmatic, common sense way, like, let's just ask. And of course, it's more complicated. And the model, the Lenfest model, has grown over time to accommodate the nuance that's needed to do that. But really, at the end of the day, it's like, how do we just make sure that we're meeting the needs on the ground for those making decisions? So over the 20 years of the program, we've fiddled with the recipe. We've tried a little bit of this, we've tried a little bit of that, and all the while being really self-reflective about, like, what does it take to bridge this gap and make sure that research is informing decision-making and really making outcomes better for the oceans. And as we've developed and refined that approach, we've really realized that there is something to creating a more integrated process, to making sure that decision makers are in the room when then researchers are thinking about which research questions to ask, that we're really tending carefully to that process of understanding what the researchers are going to do, to understand what findings are emerging, to carefully facilitating those conversations all along the way. And it turns out that if you tend to that really carefully and you think about it and you staff it appropriately, you get more relevant and trusted research, you get better outcomes, which is really what we want. When we think about this world right now, where we're thinking a lot about lack of trust in research, lack of understanding of science and research, this model that Lenfest really pioneered and piloted is all about that. It just happens a lot behind the scenes. So Donna shared a little bit about what this program has produced over the last 20 years. And of course, it's had a lot of research, done a lot of grant making. I don't even know how many grants. That's a good number to know. How many grants have been produced? And a lot of really important real world outcomes. But it has also sparked a chain reaction of other kinds of efforts and initiatives that I think are really important. We kicked off programs here internally at Pew that deepen the connections between research and the conservation and environmental advocacy and policy work. We created new training initiatives for the Pew Marine Fellows that dug into how can researchers think through how to work more closely with partners on the ground and what does it mean to integrate that into their Pew Marine Fellowships. We developed ways as we were thinking through what does it mean to do this work well. We developed ways to understand how we were bridging that gap. What was our return on investment? What did it look like to do things differently? And ways to implement that so that others could learn from us as well. So taking those measures and the learning that we gained through developing this model and making sure others could take that on too. As Donna mentioned, we wrote and published so an early time, mostly to help us understand what was this thing that we were trying to do and could anyone help us? And so by publishing, we allow others to weigh in and help us understand how to do it better. And it has actually kicked off this growing body of literature about how funders and grant makers and philanthropists think about their grant making when it comes to co-production and closer partnerships between researchers and decision makers. And this program served as the genesis for a forum of research funders from around the world across all issues, not just environment, who are transforming research systems to support much closer partnerships between researchers and the rest of society, which has now become my day job. So I've gone from just thinking about fisheries to much broader. And we were able to do all of that because of colleagues here who were creative and willing to set aside the status quo and didn't accept no for an answer and always pushed for action. Many of those friends are here today, and it's really wonderful to see everybody. And I want to say a special thank you, and I promise not to cry just yet, to Charlotte, with whom I started this path. I was just sharing that when we started together, we had babies, and now those babies are seniors in high school. So it's been a lot. I was trying to find the picture of them as chubby little babies, and now they're skinny high school seniors off to do other things. but she has been the steel thread through this whole program. She's done this with her good humor, her tenacity, her warmth, and her intelligence. And she's created a program with an amazing legacy. And as many of you know, she's going on to take this into a new life, into a new program. So today we're going to hear from program staff and a few of the individuals who've been supported by this program and their stories of impact. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Close to lead off the next step.
And we'll invite our first panel to come up now. So while they're getting set up, I'm going to say a few words about the next part of our session here tonight. My name is Sarah Close. I'm currently a program director at Blue Convergence Fund, but until January, I spent the last 8 years as a program officer at the Lenfest Ocean Program, managing our climate impacts on oceans grant-making portfolio. So you just heard from Angela about the way that we work and how we evolved over time to get to this point and some of the motivations behind that. And what we're going to do in this panel and the following panel are really to unpack some of the details of what Angela talked about. And we're happy to have some of our grantees here to actually tell you what it's looked like from their perspective. So I'm going to set the stage a little bit for this first panel that's really going to reflect more on our process of co-developing and co-designing research projects. Prior to coming to the Lenfest Ocean Program, I worked for a program where we often said the following about working at the boundary of science and society. We said regular exchange builds trust, understanding, and appreciation for the capabilities of science and the pressure of real-world challenges. I believe that our work at the Lenfest Ocean Program has really helped advance that type of regular exchange and helped build that trust and understanding over time. And it often starts with this process of developing new ideas and new projects. We start with understanding needs, which is at its core a process of having conversations and listening to communities and decision makers about their needs, as Angela said, but not just what information do you need, also when do you need this information? Who should it come from? Who's a trusted messenger for this community? What form should it be in? And we could go on and on. And we listen to scientists and researchers about where their research is, how emerging research is poised to make a difference on certain challenges, or what the scientific capabilities actually are for some of these really hard topics. So from there, we have really iterative conversations about how to design a research project that can actually put those pieces together, bring the right people to the table in order to have those conversations throughout the process. And the outcomes for how these projects are designed and what they look like, how they're structured to meet these needs vary wildly. We have also, over these years, developed a lot of different processes for getting at project ideas. We have what we often think of or talk about as like the traditional project development process with targeted iterative conversations over time with prospective grantees or prospective partners, where we arrive at projects that are designed to meet either very targeted research needs or sometimes at task forces or expert working groups that bring together larger groups of experts around a common challenge or question. And also try to think about, building frameworks that other people could use in other places and things like that. But as you might expect, that method of grant making is very time intensive, and you arrive at one project at a time. And so over the recent years, we also started experimenting with a few new ways to develop projects. In 2019, we held an ideas lab to bring people together for an intensive workshop designed to break through on a very challenging topic and develop some new thinking through which we could put forward a number of different research projects. And then most recently, we started experimenting and moving forward with open requests for proposals to increase our ability to reach new communities and people who we may not know about, and to hear from them about what their priorities are and needs around the world, and how their projects were designed to engage with people over time and meet those needs. So across these approaches, and no matter the approach, the aim in all of this was to develop projects that build in that notion of regular exchange and trust building, and that are responsive, engaged, and rigorous. So we're really happy today to have grantees from across some of our 125, apparently, projects. to talk about that process and our other program officer, Jason Landrum, to moderate that conversation.
One. There we go. It's on. Let's check that on. Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks to everybody who's joined this celebration event today. It's really exciting to see some familiar faces and some faces maybe I've only seen in 2 dimensions as we have been interacting digitally. I'm Jason Landrum. I'm a senior program officer with the Lenfest Ocean Program, and I've been honored to be part of this program for over 8 years. Speaking about long times working together. As Sarah mentioned, as she was alluding to, she and I have been in the business of co-designing projects with wonderful people, some of which are here and have joined us today on this panel. And with a common focus of, as Sarah was mentioning, to develop projects, co-develop projects that are positioned to inform coastal and ocean decision-making, whether it be for management, conservation, or restoration of those resources. To that end, this esteemed panel, I'd like to introduce them as individuals who have worked closely with us and who we share a really wonderful bond with over the years that we've worked with together. We have Tim Essington from the University of Washington. We've got Sarah Lester from Florida State University. We've got Matt Oliver from the University of Delaware. And we've got Maritza Sepúlveda from the Universidad de Valparaíso. Each of you has delivered projects or developed projects with our program in different ways, as Sarah was talking about, whether it be through developing individual projects one-on-one with us, or spearheading task forces of groups of experts that can really hone in and focus some concrete information that can be useful for decision makers, or responding to some of our requests for proposal announcements, or participating in our ideas lab. All of you have represented different engagement points with our program over the years. And some of you have engaged with us in multiple times. So we've got some repeat offenders up here on this panel. With that, I would love for each of you to briefly introduce the project or projects that you worked on and share a little bit about the experiences that you had with our program in co-designing that those projects, and why that process was helpful into creating projects that were positioned to be so successful. We'll start with Matt, and then we'll move down the line.
All right, thank you very much. On? Yeah. Again, Matt Oliver. I'm at the University of Delaware. I'm a biological oceanographer there. And way back in 2016, 17, the dark ages, seems like, we had a problem. And that problem was very specific to Delaware Bay. One thing was that the Atlantic sturgeon, which was one of the largest fisheries in the East Coast of the United States, historically, of course, that collapsed in early 1900s from overfishing, was listed in 2012 as endangered. Delaware Bay turns out to be a hotspot for Atlantic sturgeon, and they interact not only with shipping by ships, but also with a legal gillnet fishery for striped bass. And there was an issue, which was as soon as that fish became endangered, the reports of catching Atlantic sturgeon went to 0, because why would you report yourself speeding, right? It's a hard problem. So we thought that we could actually use satellite observations to predict where these animals were going to be on a day-to-day basis with up to a 3-day forecast. And it turned out that from the technical side, we were about 90% accurate, which was amazing if you think about a satellite in space predicting where a fish is going to be. And the issue was how to get the information out to a group of users that felt like that they were just going to be penalized if they reported interactions. And so we made a tool that would predict these things with the hopes that the utility to them would actually be to avoid the fish. Because it turns out if you're fishing for striped bass and a big sturgeon gets in your nets, it actually causes several days of downtime. And so the alignment was there between the fishermen who didn't want to catch it, the state that needed to regulate it, and from the conservation side, people who wanted to conserve. So all those were pointing in the right direction. But we put together a tool that was very technical until we realized that most of our users basically used flip phones and didn't have GPS on their boats. It's a poor community up and down in Delaware Bay that does this. And so we came up with a texting service that was all SMS to figure out how to take our predictions and put them into this format. And we thought this was wildly successful until nobody liked it. And the reason why nobody liked it at first is that there's an advantage for both conservation groups and for fishermen for the ocean to be a little bit mysterious of not knowing where things are. And as soon as we unveiled that, conservation groups didn't like it because they thought we were just giving them a roadmap to exploit these sturgeon. And the fishermen didn't like it because they thought, well, now you know, they felt like it was sort of like this, you know, technological cram down. And so we were very unpopular. And the reason why is in fact, when we proposed this to the state, they all said to us, doing this sort of prediction, you're about 10 years ahead of where we're going to be. And I'll have to say that system's still running. 10 years, different groups have picked it up. NOAA, IUCE, NASA, other groups have picked it up. But now it's showing up again as being really, really important. It did take about 10 years. And so my experience with Charlotte really in the beginning was, you know, are you going to take a chance on a technology that we think can work, but could be in fact wildly disruptive? And it was disruptive for a very long time. And but now the state uses it for time of year permitting. So if somebody wants to build a pier or put something in the water, they use our prediction system to basically say you can go here between these dates or this date or not this date. And so it's had definite impact. And so we're doing a whole re-review of the tool now, and I think we ended up, I mean, there's only about 47 permit holders, commercial fishermen, but we have like 5,000 users. And we don't know why. Are they just like spamming this out? I have no idea how that even works. It's just the mysteries of the interweb. So we're trying to sleuth through that, but it's enough so that when it turns off, we get phone calls, right? And so it's, we're third party, we're not the state, we're not the fishermen, but I guess over time, just consistency and, you know, the forecast always being there, maybe you become a trusted source. So that's that's it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Matt. Sarah, if you could comment, introduce your project briefly, and then how you engaged with our staff.
Sure. So I'm Sarah Lester. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biological Science at Florida State University. And prior to the Lenfest grant, which I have right now, I'm part of the final cohort. Someone told me I maybe broke Lenfest. I don't think that's true. So my lab had been doing some like basic marine ecology work in Bonaire. So we were doing some coral reef surveys and working with a local coral restoration group there. And for those of you that don't know, Bonaire is a Dutch Caribbean island in the very southern part of the Caribbean. So next to Curacao, it's close to Venezuela. And one of the things it's known for is having some of the healthiest reefs in the Caribbean. And part of that is because it's been quite well protected. So the Bonaire National Marine Park was established in 1979. It encircles the entire island and provides some level of protection from the coastline out to the 60-meter water depth contour. And the marine park is managed by a non-governmental entity known as STNAPA, which has been granted authority by the government to manage that protected area. And my lab had interacted some with STNAPA, mainly to get permits for our research and occasionally to tell them a little bit about the work that we had done. And so we had some sense of what their priorities were and their needs and also their capacity limitations. And also from doing work there, we are acutely aware that the health of Bonaire's coral reefs are really threatened by climate change. So coral bleaching has become pretty much an annual occurrence in the Caribbean with devastating consequences for corals. And this is a critical issue for an island like Bonaire, where a large part of their economy is from tourism, and in particular, tourism centered around scuba diving. So if you're a diver, you've probably either gone to Bonaire or wanted to go to Bonaire. And so within that context, in 2022, me and my collaborators at Florida State, which includes my co-PI, Andrew Rasweiler, and my really fabulous PhD student, Laurel Field, saw this intriguing request for proposals, or RFP, from the Lenfest Ocean Program. And it was called Managing Protected Areas in a Changing Ocean. And this RFP was looking for projects that were focused on monitoring ecosystem changes and incorporating climate change considerations into marine protected area management. And the thing that really struck me, which will not be surprising to any of you that have worked with Lenfest, is that there was a real focus on making sure that these projects would fill needs of stakeholders, practitioners, and the managers of these protected areas. There was not an interest in purely academic projects that would tack on a little bit of outreach at the end. There really needed to be that co-design, and that was very exciting to us. And so we reached out to Stanapa and told them about this request for proposals to see if it was an opportunity that they might be interested in collaborating with us on. And they were incredibly enthusiastic. So they were also acutely aware of the threats and challenges posed by climate change. And yet they had almost no climate monitoring. They had no sort of climate response or climate adaptation built into their management plan. They saw it as a high priority, but something they were really struggling to find the resources and time to deal with. So like many entities that manage protected areas in small island states, they have a small staff, and those staff are wearing many hats, and they just did not have the capacity to think about climate change. And so we saw this as a perfect opportunity for collaboration, but also one that would not have happened if it wasn't for this request for proposals. And so, and it really encouraged us to co-design a project from the start. So the project started in the middle of 2023, and it'll end at the end of this year. So still not done yet, but some of the things that we're focusing on is estimating climate vulnerability and how that might interact with non-climate stressors. So we're particularly interested in how understanding whether reducing local stressors, so things that they have more capacity to actually change, like water pollution or the impacts from divers, whether that might make particular areas less susceptible to climate impacts. We've also been performing a gap analysis of their monitoring efforts to figure out whether there's ways that they can better reallocate those efforts to detect early warning signs of climate impacts. And so a lot of that has been focused on doing a lot of in-water monitoring of temperature and then comparing that to the data that you would get from satellites to better understand patterns of thermal stress around the island and to figure out how we can monitor those patterns in the most cost-effective and efficient way. Some of the targeted outputs that we're hoping to produce from this project are to provide guidance to prioritize ongoing monitoring efforts of the management agency, suggesting possible management responses to climate impacts, and evaluating possible new zoning regulations within the protected area. Half of our budget has gone to Stanapa to help provide them with the resources to scale up some of their monitoring efforts, and critically to hire a full-time staff person that's focused on climate resilience and working directly with our research team. And I have to say, Lenfest has really motivated us and supported our team to really carefully plan our outreach and dissemination efforts, and I think that's had a really valuable impact on the project. So this past spring, we had a series of stakeholder workshops. We met with local dive operators, we met with local fishers, we met with local environmental organizations to show them some of our preliminary results and to get their feedback on how we might best translate those results into management change. And in the fall, we're planning a workshop with MPA managers throughout the Dutch Caribbean so that we can share some of the lessons that we've learned in Bonaire with other islands that are facing some of the same challenges. And I would just say my team is really grateful for the support of the Lenfest Ocean Program. It's really enabled us to do research that we feel is quite impactful and closely tied to management needs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. Maritza?
Thank you very much. I'm Maritza Sepúlveda from Chile, from the University of Valparaiso, and I'm so sorry because English is not my first language. But okay, I think I'm very lucky because I had the chance to work in 2 different Lenfest projects. The first one, the name was the Marine Mammal Bycatch Group, was because, okay, I'm so sorry, I work on marine mammals and especially in interaction and bycatch of these species in Chile. Chile is a really big fishing country, one of the most important fishing country in the world. So for us, the interaction, and also we host almost, I don't know, 45% of the marine mammals in the world. So, okay, it's important. Fishing and marine mammals together, not good. Not good. Okay, so okay, we'll start with the project because as maybe some of you knows that the Marine Mammal Protection Act rule established that every country that export fish or fish products to the US must comply the same rules at this country, which is not surpass the bycatch of marine mammals. If we, as a country, a foreign country, surpass the limits, the export will be closed. And that's for Chile is critical. It's really complicated. So Andrew Punt and his team congregates a lot of different, really good experts around the world and select 2 countries, Iceland with really good data on bycatch and marine mammals, and another country with not such good data, which was Chile. Okay, so we work together, and as a team, we develop really good methodologies and tools to recommend countries and managers how to get information about, I don't know, abundance and bycatch of marine mammals, okay? And that was good in Chile in just one case for sea lions, which are pinnipeds, because we have relative good data on pinnipeds in our country. But the problem was with the other marine mammals, especially cetaceans and small cetaceans. We have no idea where they are, how many they are, and the problems, which species have problems with which fisheries, etc. Okay, and the project ends very good, but we still have those really relevant gaps. And I remember I met Ellen Hines in a marine mammal conference, I don't remember where, and I talked to her and comment about the needs that we as a country have about. We need to estimate bycatch of marine mammal. We need to know more about the risk of these species, not only for the Marine Mammal Protection Act rule, but for the conservation of our species. And I remember after that, she was really interested. She developed a tool, the name is BIRA, which is the bycatch risk assessment, which briefly consists in establish the risk for any species, even if you don't have good data on that species. Just to collect data wherever you can, just for experts, just for fishermen, wherever, but try to gather, try to collect information and try to establish a risk for this species. And I remember we met with Jason in Barcelona, no? In Barcelona in another marine mammal conference, and we exposed the problem. And Jason was really, really supportive about the project, the idea. And you put a lot of to Ellen and to me. Okay, write a proposal, discuss. Let's continue discussing. And that's it. That was really, we were really happy at the end of that conference, and we tried and we wrote a proposal together, a second proposal. And we won the project. We were really happy. And guess what? COVID. Okay, so, oh my God. So it was not so easy, but even that, and especially with the help of Jason and also Kayla, we ran the project, even online. And this, I want to stop a little bit more on this second project, which is the name is Assessing Marine Mammal Bycatch Risk in Chile, because this project it was really nice because we work together, not only scientists, but also with policymakers in Chile, with managers in Chile. And there is, I think, one of the many strengths of this project is that contrary to our neighbors, at least in South America, where scientists work in this side and managers work on that side, we, after this project, work together just to discuss, just to change experience and knowledge. And after that, and now, till now, the project just is ending right now, or last year. But now, in contrast to the situation of many different countries, we established a collaborative framework involving, as I mentioned, managers, scientists. And with this approach, we are now combined and we are establishing different rules that are helping a lot to the conservation of marine mammals in Chile, and we are continuing with that. So I am very happy and very lucky to be part of this project because these two Lenfest projects are helping a lot of conservation of marine mammals in Chile. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maritza. And Tim?
Yeah, hi everyone. On the way over here, I was realizing that if Lenfest was an airline, I'd be like Diamond Elite status, I think. I won't tell you what the numerator was, but I heard what the denominator and the total number of projects was. I went, oh man, there's way too much Tim involved. And I say that just to give context. Like I've had the chance to work with the people here an awful lot. So I'm going to eventually get to the question Jason posed. But before that, I just want to say what when I hear sort of Sarah kind of give the overview and Angela give the overview and Jason in terms of like how they approach stuff, they make it sound super easy. What they're trying to do, which Charlotte clearly doesn't think it's very easy. They make it appear really easy. But I think what they do is it's something of a magic trick of taking, like, how do you get the best of both worlds? So get a bunch of scientists who want to do like creative, innovative stuff, and you want to foster that. And you also want them to do something that's actually useful and not just jumping into rabbit holes. And that's like really hard to thread that needle. And their sort of deliberateness by which they do that and the vision they have and their sort of dedication to that vision is really, really impressive. That's why I wanted to give that context of being about a frequent flyer is like, I've seen that in every project I've had a chance to be involved in. So I'm just gonna talk about just two of the projects that I've had a chance to work on. One of the projects was a project that I co-led with Phil Levin. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. That was the lead a task force to help essentially a US-focused model for how we can give guidance on how to build fishery ecosystem plans as sort of as a complement to the standard fishery management plans that are sort of embedded in all of our laws and policies. Olaf was on that task force and maybe someone else here. I see Ben there. Ben wrote most of it. Hi, Ben. And so our task was to come like practical guidance. So let's not get in the clouds and let's not think about what would be super cool, but what would actually be useful and how can we translate knowledge of a bunch of experts in a lot of different fields, ranging from economics to modeling and everything sort of in between, into something that could actually be used by sort of day-to-day practitioners. Charlotte was so patient that whole process because we were a rabbit hole group. Like we were full of rabbit hole file people. And she was great about like being skeptical of everything we're sort of doing along the way and pulling us out of the rabbit holes and pushing towards stuff that was useful. But the stuff that I wrote, so we did a thing, like I said, Ben wrote most of the report. I got a lot of attention. The thing that I think was really cool was after the project was over, you know, I was sitting around thinking that was fun and got, I think it's an email from Charlotte, I think initially it was like, hey, there's things happening in the Caribbean. And as you might know, Caribbean is a tough place to do fisheries management. It doesn't have a whole lot of information. Every island is totally different. They're all facing different challenges. And as a result, on one hand, a fishery ecosystem plan makes total sense. So rather than sort of managed by species, it doesn't really make any sense in a place like the Caribbean. On the other hand, there was a sense like, well, we can't do fishery ecosystem plans because we don't have enough information. And this myth like, oh, you can't do that unless you have gobs of information. So thanks to the Lenfest team, they sort of coordinated a few trips of me to come down there and to work with them. And that was really eye-opening in a couple ways. One, it was just great to see people read it beyond Ben. Thank you for laughing. But also, like in my day job, I'm mostly a teacher. And this analogy may not land with everyone, but there are so many times I put together a lecture that I think is perfect. Like all I need to do is hit play and everyone's going to understand, enlightenment's going to happen, and I'll be done. I'm always like shocked. They have questions at the end. And that's exactly the experience I had going down in the Caribbean. It's like all this work came into this report and we turned it in and like they had questions. And they were great questions. So it was great to be able to like be an interpreter of like, oh, this is what we meant by this. Like, oh, this is a good question. Let's dig a little deeper on that. And lo and behold, Caribbean has fishery ecosystem plans as one of like their primary management regulatory tools, which is fantastic. Quickly, I'll also talk about the ideas lab that Sarah talked about. It was in this room. Emmett was there. Olaf was off there. Probably a bunch of other people there. Katie, were you there? I can't remember. Katie might have been there. No, she wasn't. And I won't get into the details of how it was run, but it was really, really great. It had that same model of like, let's people be creative, but let's corral them. Let's bring them back into something that is useful. And as part of that, there was a lot of just great, really structured brainstorming, and people developed ideas and refined the ideas. And the part that I remember was hardest was we had to go to a table sitting right over there that had, I think it was Rich Seagraves was there. And he gave us the grilling. So Rich Seagraves was a former member of the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council, and you had to make the case to Rich that what you did was useful. And he was not the person to say, good job. He told you exactly what he wanted. And all that led to these projects that were really, really interesting. So I got to do a project on that. I won't get into the details of that, but that whole process was really, really rich, and something I wish I'd written down how we actually did it, because I would love to try to emulate it.
Thank you so much, Tim. I want to thank all of our esteemed panel and just say from the heart, from the bottom of my heart, it's been a pleasure working with all of you over the years. And thank you so much for being pioneers in this space and creating the impact that you did with your projects and your project teams. So thank you so much for being part of this journey with us. And one round of applause for our esteemed panelists, please. And next, we're going to transition to another panel. So I will invite our panelists to sit down. Thank you. And invite my colleagues Kayla Ripple and Emily Knight to come up to lead us through the next panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason, and to our panelists before. For those of you who don't know me, hello, my name is Kayla Ripple. I'm a principal associate with the Lenfest Ocean Program. I'm on the outreach team, also joined by Emily Knight and Victoria Bell, who is diligently taking photos and videos of us in the front row. I've been with this program for almost 5 years now, so a lot less time than some of the other Lenfest folks that you've heard from. But the work that we've been able to do and accomplish in this short time frame has truly been a testament to the team, our grantees, partners, and the process. At Lenfest, we think science and knowledge can help inform conversations. We don't try to persuade stakeholders about how they should go about their business, but rather we work with them to produce knowledge that is useful and will take conversations to an actionable level. So you just heard how we co-design those research projects to be useful for the people who ask for it. But the outreach strategies we identify seek to elevate those relationships and enable continued engagement throughout the lifetime of the project, rather than just saying at the end, here's some cool research results. What do you think you can do with them? So we're constantly cultivating those conversations throughout the life of the project. And in this panel, you'll hear more about how we've done that and how our grantees have done that. And really, our outreach plans are tailored to each project individually. I really want to underline that. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution for each of these. We have to meet people where they are, and that's what our outreach strategies try to do. And in a time where the line between facts and beliefs can be somewhat blurred, at the heart of it is competing needs for natural resources, challenges to our worldview and perspectives. And at the center of it is dynamic environmental conditions that are accelerating the timeline at which this is happening. So simply just talking to people can be really hard sometimes, but being able to invest in the time and resources to help our grantees align their research and have those conversations and focus on that talking piece has proven really valuable for impact of research results and also those relationships and continuing to move forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily to start our panel talking about our outreach strategies. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Kayla, for that introduction. That was great. Yeah, so it's so great to actually get to look out at the audience and see all these familiar faces. I'm Emily Knight. I'm Senior Outreach Manager for the Lenfest Ocean Program. I've been here about 7.5 years now. And honestly, I was so grateful to get the opportunity to join this program. I moved all the way across the country just to join the team. So we have 3 panelists up here with us. We have Emmett Duffy from the Smithsonian Institution. He has been leading, along with Gabrielle, an effort called Marine Biodiversity Dialogues, which has been a series of expert task forces that's been going on since 2020. And then we have Ellen Pickett from Stony Brook University. She is a repeat offender with Lenfest, but we wanted to have her speak a little bit to one of Lenfest's kind of signature task forces, the Forage Fish Task Force, which predates me, but the impact of that has stayed with us for it completed in April of 2012, and it continues to have impacts. And then we have Jake Kreitzer from Narracus, who's been leading, actually, as part of the Managing Protected Areas in a Changing Ocean portfolio as well, along with Sarah Lester. He's been leading a project to blend Indigenous knowledge with Western science to inform climate-smart MPAs in the Northeast United States. So we have 3 very different projects. Kind of like Sarah said earlier, for outreach strategies, we try lots of different things and see what works. And so these projects represent very kind of complementary outreach efforts. So without further ado, I want to start off with you, Ellen, and the Forage Fish Task Force, which put out its report in April of 2012. There are copies of it back there. There's also copies of the FEP Task Force, by the way. So I wonder if you can say a few words about the Forage Fish Task Force for context, and then talk about how you worked with the program to lead outreach around the release of the results, which made, for no pun intended, a very big splash.
Sure. Well, thanks, Emily, for that. And thanks, everyone. While I have the microphone, I would like to thank the Lenfest Ocean Program and the Pew Charitable Trusts and Lenfest family for your support and for your cooperation and your help all these years. It's really, it's been pivotal to my career. We've done wonderful things together, and I've really enjoyed working with you, and I really appreciate having had this opportunity. It's a privilege. So a little bit about the Forage Fish Task Force. Well, it's hard to say a little bit. Our report was called Little Fish, Big Impact. And the idea of the Lenfest Forage Fish Task Force was to talk about a group of fish that everyone needed to know about, but many people didn't know about. And the deeper meaning was to try to change the way everyone perceived the ocean and fish. This is my view years later. But, you know, at that point, people thought about fish in the ocean as how much can we extract from the ocean? How much can we take out? What's the maximum? How do we sustain this? And it turns out that for forage fish, these little fish that are called forage fish because everything else in the ocean feeds on them, forages on them, that one of our big findings was that they're worth more if you leave them in the water than if you take them out in a net. And the reason for that is because they really do fuel entire food webs. The ecosystems depend on these little fish. So that was our task. Our task was...
Sounds easy.
Yeah, it was really easy. In terms of the outreach strategy, you know, I was listening to the previous panel and I realized like our charge and our audiences were so much broader. It really was like everyone should know about forage fish. It was a global issue. It was a transformation in the way we think about the ocean. And a lot of the other projects have very specific regional, local audiences. So the outreach strategy had to be really broad, really diverse, and reach all kinds of people. And we did reach out to policymakers, for example, the European Parliament, the Food and Agricultural Organization in Rome. And so, some really high level decision makers, all the way down to the person who goes to the grocery store and has to decide which of these species of fish would be a good choice. And the Seafood Watch program, which many of you may be familiar with, they ended up taking on our recommendations and building them in to their recommendations. And so when you see the red light on forage fish, it's because of the Lenfest program. So, really broad, diverse audiences. We had fisheries managers, of course, because these were fish, were a big audience. Also fishing communities, recreational fishermen, commercial fishermen were very interested in the results of the report. And then businesses like our trade associations, I'm thinking of GoEd. I don't know how many of you have heard of GoEd? A couple. Okay, so GoEd is an advocacy organization for the omega-3 industry. So a lot of you have probably heard if you take your omega-3s, it's good for your heart health. Forage fish, the fish oil produces a lot of omega-3s. Well, the Trade Industry Association asked me to come speak with them about the Lenfest Forage Fish Task Force report. And I was a little wary of accepting the invitation because I was afraid they'd start throwing pills at me or bottles of pills at me. Because maybe they thought I was ruining their industry, but, it led to a really good conversation. And then just finally to give some other very different examples, I was invited up to Sitka, Alaska for the Herring Festival. And little did I know they had decided I was going to be queen of the Herring Festival. And they already worshipped herring and the herring roe. And they had the festival around the time that the roe was plentiful. And they basically said, thank you for telling the rest of the world how important these fish are. We've always known it. So I think that's a broad overview of the audiences. And then in terms of, do you want me to talk about impact or a little bit about impact? So I mentioned one thing like Seafood Watch incorporating the results. One of the biggest impacts we had was that we made the case so strongly, and Tim Essington is on the panel here, you remember this? First I thought, okay, how am I going to get the task force? Will the task force agree to this? One of our recommendations was that forage fish are so important that if there is not a fishery for that forage fish, do not start one. I thought that was radical. But the task force agreed unanimously that would be one of our recommendations. And I was shocked, but after the report came out, it was the recommendation that was taken up more so than any other recommendation that we made. Within weeks, the California Department of Fish and Game issued a no new forage fish policy. They've been deliberating on it, and the report coming out said, this is it. This is what we needed. This was the evidence that will help us do this. If you look around at regional fishery management councils in the U.S., the Mid-Atlantic Council has a no new forage fish policy. The Pacific Council has a no new forage fish policy. This has really become a widespread thing. And then you go to a specific species where there already was a big fishery for a long time. And that fishery I'll talk about is menhaden, also called peanuts and bunker. Lots of nicknames for this fish. So this fishery had been going on for a long time, and you couldn't just stop fishing. So we worked with lots of other groups that were working on trying to get ecosystem-based reference points established for menhaden. And the end of the story is that it did happen. The Lenfest report played a huge role in it. At one point in time, there were options, management options that the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission could choose among. And one of our rules, or one of our guidance rules, was one of the options that was up there. And in 2020, Menhaden fisheries were finally managed with ecological reference points. So that was a long time after 2012. Anyway, I think enough said for now.
Yeah, and I actually, with reference especially to Menhaden, I have to give a shout out to our friends in environment who ran off with those results too from the Forage Fish Task Force and use them in their own campaign strategies. So Emmett, my next question is for you about marine biodiversity dialogues. I think in terms of outreach, marine biodiversity dialogues is a great example of the importance of doing outreach throughout the life of projects. And we've been working really closely with you and the task force members. Can you say a few words about what marine biodiversity dialogues is and also how you've worked with us to do outreach for 5 years now?
I can. I also would like to, like Ellen, express, oh, I guess I need to use this. Hello?
Yeah, live stream.
Yes, sorry. Hello. Thank you to the Lenfest Ocean Program, Pew Foundation, and others, and the team, of course, who we've worked with very closely over the last 5 years. And it's really changed my life. I think that's fair to say. It's changed the science I do. Hopefully that will come out in what I'm saying. So the Marine Biodiversity Dialogues came from a recognition that we don't have a very good sense on a national scale of what we have in the oceans of the United States in terms of marine biodiversity. Something that kicked this off was several years ago. There was this beautiful map of the United States in the New York Times that showed on land where all the biodiversity is, the endemics, where it's going with climate change, and the entire ocean around the United States was white. And yet, the United States has more ocean territory than land territory. So we thought we have to do something about this. And, or I should say, Lenfest was already thinking, and the National Marine Sanctuaries Foundation was already thinking we have to do something about this. And we got in on the action. And basically, Marine Biodiversity Dialogues is called Dialogues because it was an intensive process of consultation among a group of international experts about how one would go about doing an assessment of national scale biodiversity. And this includes the territories in the Pacific and very large areas, how you would go about doing that, and then to do it with data that are available right now in a time-bound fashion. And so we were able to come up with a framework for doing that. We worked with a bunch of colleagues. Daniel Dunn, currently at University of Queensland, was a co-PI on that project. And we published a paper that presented the framework and the results, and in particular applied it to a case study of what do we have inside and outside protected areas within the United States Ocean. So that was the first part of it. And then Lenfest came back, as somebody else said, well, we got that done, and said, well, but why do we care about biodiversity in the first place? It wasn't phrased exactly in those terms, but it was basically about what do we need to know about biodiversity? How are people using it? Why is it important? And can we put a scientific basis on that will help in informing management and conservation? So that was our second project. Now, to come back to your question, Emily. So I came from a fairly classical academic background. You know, as I'm sorry, I've forgotten. Somebody described already that, you know, we do the research. If the results are cool, if it gets into a good journal, then you start talking to people about how do we do the outreach and the communications. But with Lenfest, we had the outreach and communications planning and interaction from the very beginning. And I would say that the Lenfest team, our good friends, were really as almost like co-PIs on the project, working very closely with us throughout. So in terms of outreach, this began with a really intensive consultation process. In fact, it began before we started the project. They had really censused many experts in the field to ask, is this possible? Is this a good idea? How might we go about doing it? And that continued throughout. We worked closely on the approach that we would use, how it would happen, who should be in the room, at what stages, to do what. And in particular, Emily and Lenfest made a lot of connections for us. So convening throughout the process of this, public webinars, briefings for folks from the agencies that have ocean portfolios in the US, funders, NGOs, conservation organizations, and so on. And that was really critical to the success of the project, partly because we got input about what is needed by those parties before we were starting things or as we were going along. And secondly, because it prepared an audience when the results came out, people who had been thinking about this, how it could be useful and what they could do with it. And so it was a really a learning experience for me. I had heard the word co-design, it was kind of a buzzword that we put into our proposals, but I didn't really learn what it was until I started working with Lenfest, and particularly in the second part of this, where we were trying to understand from people out in the communities, why is biodiversity important to you? What role does it play in your life? And that was very interesting and important. And so I was going to say something else, but I'll just leave it at that for now, I think. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think with marine biodiversity dialogues too, I'll just say it led to a national strategy.
Oh, that was the thing.
But it's been really amazing to then take that into communities in the Gulf of Mexico, the Chesapeake Bay and Puget Sound, and hear what a recreational fisherman thinks about biodiversity and why it matters. And so it's been a really great process. My third question is for you, Jake. So you've been leading this knowledge, blending Indigenous knowledge and Western science, and it really represented for us a different approach to outreach in that with the managing protected areas for a changing climate portfolio, as was mentioned before, we were really asking grantees to build research and engagement into the grant. And this project has been it really highlights how important outreach is for relationship building, and that relationships are at the heart of use-inspired research and bringing people together. So I wonder if you could say some words about your project as well as the intensive relationship building you've been doing as part of it.
Yeah, happy to. And let me just start off with echoing the thanks that all the other panelists have conveyed to Lenfest. I'm actually technically sort of a repeat offender. Going back to, I think, 2019 and into 2020, Jason and I met and realized we thought alike, we had a lot of common interests. We started brainstorming project ideas. We brought Charlotte into those discussions. Early in 2020, we really started to land on a good nugget of an idea, wrote a proposal, it got approved, we were ready to go. And then I decided to leave my former post at EDF to take up the executive directorship at Niraku. So I had to kind of sheepishly say to Jason, hey, so here's the thing. Fortunately, EDF had a pretty deep oceans bench, and Kristen Kleisner stepped in. I think probably did a better job with that grant than I would have. But I did it a couple of years until I figured the Lenfest staff were not quite as irked with me before coming back when I saw the Climate Smart MPA RFP. And initially, when we saw that RFP, we'd been starting to do more work with Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. So Ben Haskell, the former science director there, and I started talking about some ideas. It was initially focused on building kind of a climate-informed plankton projection tool. That's where we were going. But around that time, I happened to be reading Jessica Hernandez's book, Fresh Banana Leaves, which is all about this idea of bringing Indigenous science, Indigenous knowledge to addressing contemporary environmental problems. And it got me fired up. So I said to Ben, what would you think of this? And he was all for it. And we decided what we should do is bring in a series of the National Estuarine Research Reserves along the coast. So we'd have sort of a network of MPAs and the associated indigenous communities that we would, sort of give more opportunities for different contexts, both management contexts, kind of different types of problems we'd be addressing, indigenous communities that had very different characters. So we could explore this blending of indigenous knowledge and MPA management in different ways as a sort of semi-structured experimental design. We reached out to the reserves and the sanctuaries and the indigenous groups, and they were all for it. Everyone jumped right on board. So we wrote the proposal, we got the grant, and then we sort of dug in. And that's, I think, when we realized, and as Emily said, we had built in a fair bit of outreach and engagement into our plan, realized we were going to need a lot more. Everyone was really kind of enthusiastic and inspired by this general idea of somehow bringing indigenous knowledge into MPA management. Exactly what that looked like took some time to sort through. And to have those discussions, work through those ideas, prioritize them, took a lot of relationship building just among our core team of PIs. We had 4 MPAs and 2 indigenous communities, with our team at Niraku serving as kind of the conveners and facilitators. And there were a lot of new partnerships, new relationships being built there. So just within that internal core team, we needed to spend some time kind of getting to know each other, building trust, working through ideas. But everyone who was part of the project, who is still part of the project, made it clear from the outset that they were sort of representing bigger groups of people. So the reserve managers and science directors who were our co-PIs, they said, look, we're just one person at the staff of our MPA. We have people working on education, people working on research, people working on policy. We have stakeholder advisory groups. We have communities behind us. And the indigenous partners said, yeah, we're just one representative of a group and we don't all think alike. So we sort of realized that, I think initially my thought was this group would kind of come up with a plan, start executing it and convey the results to those communities. And we realized pretty quickly for everyone to be comfortable and I think confident that we were going in the right directions, we were going to have to start that outreach effort early. Before we made decisions on the specific topics we were going to tackle and how we were going to tackle them, we needed to start that outward engagement. So we actually, earlier than we expected, put in a lot of time meeting with, so for example, one of our indigenous partners is the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe down in Cape Cod. The PI representing the tribe is David Whedon, who's a great guy and a force of nature. He's their historic preservation officer and a tribal council member, but who thinks deeply and is quite knowledgeable about environmental issues as well. But he said, we do have a natural resources department. We need to engage with them. There was a big focus, there remains a big focus in the project in just education. So the idea that if we want to make MPAs more climate ready, if we want to bring indigenous knowledge, indigenous perspectives into management and into management approaches, we need to educate not just staff and scientists working, kind of day in and day out with those MPAs, but all the users. So education was a big focus. And David said, we have a whole education department. So we had to spend some time going to David's colleagues and other user groups, sort of bouncing ideas off of them, getting feedback. And it led to us kind of getting confirmation in some areas that we were going in the right direction. Other ideas kind of got shelved and brand new ones came in. So I think it made the work we're doing stronger. Key to all of that, though, as Emily said, was the program centering outreach and engagement as a core component alongside, the research. But also, I think the Lenfest team giving us a lot of flexibility to evolve our research plan along the way and working closely with us. There were, I think by and large, I feel really good about the partnership we build and what we've accomplished, but I'd be lying if I said there weren't difficulties along the way. And there were times I kind of needed to vent. bounce ideas off of.
We call those grant check-ins.
Yeah. They were kind of like therapy sessions at time for me, but the team was great. And sort of, I didn't, sometimes with funders, you feel you have to kind of really put your best foot forward. With the Lenfest crew, I never felt that way. I felt I could show all of our warts, and trust that they were going to sort of listen, understand, and give good advice. And so the project is still rolling along. We're nearing its end. But I feel really good about what we've done and where we're still to go. But I think the way the program was structured from the beginning and the way the staff engaged and supported us along the way was critical to that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. It's been such a pleasure to be able to partner with our grantees and not just be this sort of elusive, whether it's the program officer or the outreach team, we are all sort of in it together working with our grantees, and it's like the best part of the job. So I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. I also want to give a shout out to Vicki and Kayla, my team on the outreach side, and the thought partnership we also have with Jason and Sarah, senior program officers with the program, and of course, under Charlotte's leadership. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Bell. I'm a principal associate, obviously, at the Lenfest Ocean Program. I have been here for 7.5 years, just a month less than Emily, not that it's a competition. For the grantees that have been there in the same time frame that don't recognize me, my assumption is because your grant ended before March of 2020. I feel like when COVID started and we moved to Zoom, it was like flipping on a light. My job originally was kind of sitting in the background, getting everything online and doing social media. And when we moved to Zoom, a lot of people asked me, have you been here the whole time? And the answer is yes. I've just been on the background in the phone check-ins. Since then, my job has changed drastically. I've had 2 promotions, which has been amazing, but the core of the work has remained the same, getting everything online, making sure social media is done, getting everything in the newsletter. I think one of the coolest parts of the position has been seeing all the metrics on our website, which has shown me that without fail, at least 4 to 6 times a year, the Big Fish or Little Fish Big Impact report has been the top looked up thing on our website without fail. It is never stopped. And I have, without fail, never stopped hounding all of our grantees to send me photos and videos of all of their work, which is probably why I am the one up here introducing the video that Charlotte has put together. So before I show the video, I did just want to take a moment and share what you're about to see. And we've talked a little bit about this today, but as many of you know, one of the goals of Lenfest has been to support science that leads to real world change. That kind of impact doesn't happen in isolation. It depends on building relationships, sharing knowledge, and making sure that research reaches the people who can use it, whether that's policy, on the water, or within communities. At its core, this program has always been about supporting research that matters, research that is timely, trusted, and useful to the people making decisions on or about our oceans. Over time, we've come to think about this in terms of connection. There's the immediate research team, and then there's the wider circle, the network of managers, fishers, Indigenous leaders, community advocates, and decision makers who engage with the work and help bring it to life. This wider circle is incredibly essential, and it's a big part of our outreach that's focused on helping build and support those connections. As I said, a large part of my job has been using digital tools to ensure effective knowledge exchange and helping make these research more visible, accessible, and actionable. While not explicitly addressed in the video, social media over the years has played a major role in that. It's allowed us to reach broader audiences, highlight emerging results in real time, and give the grantees a platform beyond academic publications. This video offers a glimpse of how our unique approach to grant making impacted not only research teams, but also their outputs. It features a few of the many voices that has shaped or been shaped by this work. It's not comprehensive or overly polished, but it's honest, and we hope it captures something meaningful about the ripple effect this program has had. So we will start it, which...
The Lenfest is very special in the sense that it came up with the idea that it's not okay. It's not just okay to publish your stuff and leave it out there. Number one, even the publication process needs collaboration. You need partnership. You need to co-create knowledge. And so that, I think, was a real beautiful niche that the Lenfest program actually filled, specifically. We want policy relevant research that is co-created and that is taken out to the people who can actually use the information.
By training, I'm a fishery stock assessment scientist, and I work very closely with the industry. So in the past, I tried to avoid actually working with the foundations because I want to be seen as a more kind of a scientist, do good science. But this one really changed my attitude towards, how we can work in the kind of interface of a science and a policy. Now we have in my lab, we have a science-based fisheries management program. That's brand new. I don't think I can have that kind of research area or research expertise without these two projects.
So my experience of philanthropic funding has been much broader than Lenfest. I'd have to say Lenfest is a breath of fresh air in the flexibility that they showed and the approach to being able to bring things in and pivot as needed based on findings along the way. That advances the actual on-the-ground outcomes with the science way more than doing the blue sky science and then just yelling at people to get it transferred.
All I can say is it's been an incredible experience working with the Lenfest team. From start to finish of the project, we have been supported in an incredible way in the design of the project, in setting it up, thinking about partnerships, and also developing amazing opportunities to communicate about what we're doing with groups that weren't even on our radar at the start of it. I am incredibly grateful, and I'm such a fangirl of Lenfest and everything that the program has done and is doing.
One of those different things about what we've been doing with Lenfest and other kinds of projects is that we need to interface with the community. It's all about that. And how you do that is not well defined. So organizations that have that as the goal, the communication, the interaction, the development of that particular kind of project is crucial.
We were working on something that at the time sounded truly bizarre to most people that we tried to explain it to. It was to help develop a new math for setting fishing quotas and predicting what might happen in the future, not only to any one species of fish, but to the whole system. Now, here's the thing though. Nobody knew what we were talking about. And the math is simple, but really hard for people to wrap their head around because it's the opposite of what we usually did. And working with Lenfest, the whole point was to go into an enterprise of that sort. It was extremely helpful.
We have had funding to do all sorts of applied ecological work, some social ecological work, but none of that funding has allowed us to do the actions on the ground and the mobilization of the knowledge to policy like the Lenfest grant. That kind of funding is unique and it's irreplaceable.
I really think that the work that Lenfest did, the horizon scanning and scoping part of I don't know if it was every project, but all the horizon scanning and scoping that Lenfest did in advance of every project that I was engaged in meant that we were really well positioned to address questions that were of the utmost concern to the scientific community and stakeholders, and without that really careful, extensive engagement before the project started, I think there's no way we would have been as successful as we were.
The thing that was really, really incredibly helpful was the outreach part. That I'm not very good at that. So I credit a lot of the success and practical implementation of the fisheries EDM work entirely to you guys. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have done it.
I'd have to say that the Lenfest Fish Task Force was just an amazing project for me. And I knew it was a big deal when I got the grant, but it exceeded my expectations. So I think the way the Lenfest Ocean Program does things and is structured is critically important, and I hope something like it will come to take its place in the future. It's been a great, great program.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. On behalf of everybody, past and present, who has been staff of the Lenfest Ocean Program, and you can demark those people with their light blue ribbons. You all have really contributed to an amazing program, which you all have heard from today. And those of you who have been joining us online and hanging in, I very much appreciate it and hope that what you've heard today really is a testament to what the team, the Lenfest Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trusts envisioned 20 years ago. So I'm greatly indebted to the team, as well as to Donna, Michael, Margaret Bowman, the original director of the program, and of course, my co-conspirator, Angela, as she so rightly pointed out. As you heard from the team, our motto, although informal, really was that we never did anything twice. And in essence, that was because we really were always co-creating what was needed in the moment for that topic. But that's not actually an easy way to work for the staff. You never do. You're reinventing your job every time you put out a new grant or a new outreach activity. And I really give great credit to them to hanging in there and never actually questioning why we were doing that, at least to my face. So, so I will say that. And while this program will sunset at the end of this month, we are not done yet. We have a webinar. It was part of our Indigenous Knowledge Portfolio on Monday. We are holding a convening around building resilient fisheries and fishing communities at the end of May. So stay tuned. Do not turn off your newsletter links yet. And I'm just happy to say that a lot of what we have learned, I'm very happy to say, will carry on in a new program based at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors called the Blue Convergence Fund. And it would not have been possible without all of the input of many, many of you in this room who have contributed to this program. And frankly, we've learned from you as much as you've learned from us. And so I want to thank you. And now I would like to invite you to join me for cake behind those walls. Thank you.